Hello everyone, and welcome to Dark Truth Unveiled. I'm Donovan. Today, we confront a story of such senseless, random violence that it leaves a community reeling and a nation questioning. It's a story that tragically underscores how a life brimming with promise can be extinguished in an instant. In North Minneapolis, a 15-year-old honor student, a star athlete, and a beloved community figure, Deshaun Hill Jr., was full of hope and on his way to advocate for justice against violence. In a cruel twist of fate, he had a fleeting, entirely accidental encounter with a stranger on a city sidewalk. Moments later, that stranger's inexplicable rage stole Deshaun's bright future with a hail of gunfire. This is a case that highlights not only a devastating, heartbreaking loss, but also the remarkable resilience of a grieving community and the determined, methodical pursuit of justice in the face of an almost unbearable tragedy. 15-year-old Deshaun Hill Jr. was, by all accounts and from every perspective, a truly good kid, an honor roll student who excelled academically. He was also widely known and celebrated throughout Minneapolis as a star athlete. He was the starting quarterback for the North Polars football team at his North Community High School, a position of leadership and skill. Known affectionately by his loving family and wide circle of friends as D, the 10th grader was immensely popular with his classmates, deeply respected by his teachers and coaches, and absolutely adored by his two younger sisters, for whom he was a protective and inspiring older brother. Though still so young, barely on the cusp of manhood, D had already established a remarkable and well-earned reputation as a teenager who led by example. A natural role model not only for younger kids in his neighborhood who looked up to him, but also for his peers who admired his character and drive. Many who knew him, who saw his talent, his dedication, and his inherently good nature, believed with conviction that Dee Hill was destined for something truly great in life, whether it was through his exceptional athletic prowess on the football field or his sharp, inquisitive intellect in his academic pursuits. In a poignant clip from his younger years, a bright-eyed, fourth-grade Deshaun simply and earnestly stated, "My name is Deshaun Hill and I am in fourth grade. I like to learn stuff. With such big dreams, a supportive and loving family network, and a dedicated, passionate, and positive mindset, there truly seemed to be no limits to what Deshaun Hill Jr. was poised to accomplish in his life." On February 9th, 2022, the atmosphere in the North Minneapolis community was already heavy, still reeling from the shocking and controversial killing of another young black man, Amir Locke, by local law enforcement just the week prior. 22-year-old Amir had been shot and killed in an instant by a Minneapolis SWAT team during the chaotic execution of a controversial no-knock warrant at the downtown apartment where he had been staying. Police had used a key to silently access the apartment just before 7 a.m. on February 2nd. Inside, Amir, unidentifiable to the police in those split seconds, was asleep under a blanket on a couch in the living room. Body camera footage, later released, tragically caught Amir, likely startled awake by the sudden intrusion of armed officers into his living space, lifting his legally owned and licensed handgun just before he was shot 3 times by the officers. Amir Locke had not been the subject of the warrant that brought the SWAT team to that door. He had, by all accounts, done nothing wrong. He was an innocent victim of circumstance. 1 week later, on that fateful Wednesday, February 9th, students at Minneapolis North High School, deeply affected by Amir Locke's death and the broader issues it represented, were mobilizing to protest this latest instance of perceived injustice in a community already struggling with the persistent and painful scourge of gun violence, and now facing yet another needless and tragic loss of a young life. These students felt compelled to act. They were taking the afternoon away from their regular classes to engage in a peaceful, organized protest, to make their young voices heard in a call for change. It was at lunchtime that afternoon, around 12:30 p.m., that Dee Hill, a young man known for his civic-mindedness and leadership, left the relative security of his high school campus. He was heading for the nearby bus stop at the intersection of Golden Valley Road and Penn Avenue. He was on his way to join his fellow students, to lend his voice to the collective expression of grievance over needless death and the pervasive violence that had once again shaken their community to its core. It was as Deshaun walked along Golden Valley Road, a young man full of purpose and righteous conviction, that he almost imperceptibly brushed shoulders with another man who was walking in the opposite direction. The interaction, captured fleetingly on a distant camera, appeared to be entirely accidental, a slight, everyday misjudgment in the depth of space between two individuals walking past each other on a public sidewalk. Or perhaps, as some interpretations of the grainy footage suggested, the other man, for some unknown reason, may have reached out to initiate the brief contact. In the horrifying moments that followed this trivial encounter, tragically just out of the direct view of the nearest surveillance camera, the man, later described as wearing distinctive red trousers and carrying a black backpack, inexplicably pulled out a handgun. He then aimed directly at Deshaun, who was walking away, and fired. 3 shots rang out, shattering the ordinary calm of that Wednesday afternoon. The shooter was then captured on camera, fleeing the area, walking quickly away in the same direction he had originally been heading. Chillingly, his backpack was now clutched in front of him, presumably, investigators would later surmise, as he was hastily placing the murder weapon back into his bag. A single, courageous witness, a local housing director named Ashley McNamara, who was across the street at the time, saw the horrific event unfold. Reacting instantly, she bravely ran from across the street towards Dee as he lay grievously wounded on the cold sidewalk. She stayed with him, comforting him with gentle assurances that help was on the way, while she simultaneously and urgently contacted 911. Deshaun was rushed to the hospital, where medical teams fought to save his young life, but sadly, he passed away the following day from the devastating injuries he had sustained. The shock of his loss, not only to his heartbroken family, but to the entire North Minneapolis community that had watched him grow and had pinned so many hopes on his future, was palpable, profound, and widespread. He was, as many tearfully attested in the days that followed, so much more than just a talented high school football player. He was a real-life star, a beacon of hope and positivity in a sometimes challenging world. He was, by his very nature, beyond a leader. He was truly inspirational, the very epitome of what a fine, promising young man should be. Investigators arriving at the chaotic and emotionally charged crime scene found themselves facing an immediate and significant challenge. There was very little direct physical evidence to work with, a common difficulty in such sudden, public acts of violence where the perpetrator flees quickly. There was no DNA traceable to the assailant left at the scene, no discernible fingerprints recovered, no telltale fibers shed in a struggle, and crucially, the murder weapon was gone, taken by the shooter. What they did have, however, was a deeply shocked and angered community, anxious and overwhelmingly willing to assist them in any way possible. And, in the modern urban landscape, they had a network of ever-watchful surveillance cameras mounted on local businesses and private homes, cameras that could potentially provide a crucial view of the killer's movements and identity. One such camera, though its view was partially obscured, managed to capture the fleeting moment on the sidewalk where Dee had walked past the man later identified as wearing distinctive red trousers and carrying a black backpack. Diligently, and with painstaking effort, officers located and reviewed a multitude of other surveillance videos from various angles and locations. These videos, when pieced together, showed the same man in the immediate area just before the fatal shooting, and then, critically, later showed him running away from the scene. His pace quickened immediately after the shots were fired. Multiple individuals were subsequently interviewed by police who reported having had encounters earlier that day with a male fitting this general description, wearing red pants and a black jacket, on and around the vicinity of Penn Avenue and Golden Valley Road. One witness, in particular, stated that the man in question had seemed agitated and was actively looking for someone he claimed had stolen his cell phone just a short time earlier. That witness provided a clothing description consistent with the man seen on camera, a black jacket and bright orange or red pants. After their brief discussion with this agitated man, he had walked off. Only moments later, that same witness heard the sharp crack of gunshots ringing out, and then, to their alarm, saw the very same man running from the area. Ashley McNamara, the sole eyewitness to view the actual shooting itself, also provided a description of the shooter. However, in the initial shock and trauma of the event, and despite what was later verifiable from the clear video footage, as well as from other witnesses who had interacted with the shooter regarding his highly visible attire, Ashley initially described the man to police as being dressed all in black. She also initially believed, incorrectly as it turned out, that the shooter was a black man. With a working description and some fragmented video evidence, police cast a wide net, seeking assistance from the local community and beyond. Tips began pouring in from the public, ordinary citizens eager to help solve this senseless crime. One such tip, in particular, which came from the Fond du Lac Indian Reservation, seemed both curious and highly promising to the investigators. Someone from the reservation phoned the Minneapolis Police Department with specific information about a man named Cody Fohrenkam. According to the tipster, Cody Fohrenkam had previously lived on the Fond du Lac Reservation in Cloquet, Minnesota, with his mother. More recently, however, he had become homeless and had spent the previous 8 months couch surfing with various acquaintances and friends, occasionally returning to the reservation to stay for short periods with his mother. The tipster conveyed to investigators that Cody had returned to Cloquet just a few days prior to their call, and crucial rumor had it within their community that he had recently gotten into some very serious trouble back in Minneapolis. They believed, the tipster stated, that he was somehow linked to the widely publicized murder of Dee Hill. Armed with this new lead, investigators showed a photograph of Cody Fohrenkam to various individuals who had been in the North Minneapolis neighborhood on the day of the shooting. These individuals confirmed what the detectives had already begun to strongly suspect: Cody Fohrenkam was indeed the man seen in the area, acting erratically around the time of Deshaun's murder. His image was captured on several surveillance cameras, including a clear shot of him inside the local convenience store, Wally's Food, which is located very near to the intersection where Dee was tragically gunned down. The Minneapolis Police Department arranged to formally interview Cody Fohrenkam roughly 1 week after Deshaun was killed. Cody, it turned out, was not a stranger to police questioning or the inside of an interrogation room. In fact, his colorful and deeply concerning criminal history was just one more significant red flag that led detectives to focus intently and almost exclusively on him as their prime suspect. In 2012, he had been convicted of the serious crime of arson after being identified as one of 2 individuals who had poured gasoline on the porch of an occupied home in Cloquet, a home with people living inside it at the time, and then deliberately lit it on fire. His first felony conviction had come 2 years earlier when, at the young age of 19, he was convicted in Minneapolis for the illegal possession of a sawed-off shotgun, a notoriously dangerous weapon. Due to his prior conviction for a crime of violence, the arson, he had been legally barred from owning or possessing any firearms whatsoever. With this sordid and violent criminal history, coupled with multiple witnesses and clear video evidence placing the now 29-year-old Fohrenkam directly at or near the scene of Deshaun Hill's murder, police felt increasingly confident that they had their man. During the intense interrogation, police confronted Fohrenkam directly. "There was a murder at GVR, Golden Valley Road, and Penn. We're here because you're involved with this murder. You've told people. That's why you're here. We have talked to people that have put you there at the scene. There's video of you at the scene, the whole time. Cody Fohrenkam, however, initially and vehemently insisted that he was not even in Minneapolis on that day. He was far away in Wisconsin, he claimed, with his girlfriend. "Wednesday night. I think I was up there in Wisconsin," he stated with apparent confidence. "I think I might even have a ticket for the theater. Went to go see Scene 2, which investigators presumed meant the animated movie Sing 2, with my girl and her 2 nieces." Police, armed with their irrefutable surveillance footage, calmly but firmly confronted his fabricated alibi. "A week ago today is when that young man was killed. You were in Minneapolis. Okay, you're on video." "Right by Wally's." Detectives were particularly interested in the status and whereabouts of Cody's cell phone for a compelling and crucial reason. They had developed a strong theory that the theft of Cody's phone earlier that same day was directly and causally linked to the subsequent murder of Deshaun Hill Jr. On the surveillance footage of Cody captured inside Wally's food shortly before Deshaun was shot, a masked man, armed with a knife, is seen approaching Cody, striking him, and then forcibly robbing him, managing to steal Cody's cell phone before quickly fleeing the store. The robber in that incident remained unidentified, and it was absolutely crucial to note, and has been repeatedly emphasized, that there has never once been any proposal or suggestion from any quarter that young Deshaun Hill was the thief, or had any involvement whatsoever in that earlier robbery. That earlier altercation was significant in the context of Deshaun's murder, detectives theorized, precisely because this incident, being robbed and assaulted, had deeply angered and triggered Cody Fohrenkam, sending him into a blind rage. It had set him on a dangerous and ultimately fatal path. They believed that tragically culminated in the random murder of an innocent bystander. Cody had left the convenience store visibly enraged, his simmering anger escalating as he roamed the neighborhood, actively searching for the thief who had wronged him, all the while, critically, illegally carrying a concealed handgun. During the interrogation, Fohrenkam offered a series of demonstrable and easily disproven lies about his phone, when he last had it, what happened to it, and his whereabouts on the day it was taken from him. Police calmly and methodically presented their damning evidence. "We got you all over camera, dude. We got you walking down Penn. We got you shooting that kid." At first, Cody Fohrenkam complained excessively and belligerently to the detectives about his perceived mistreatment during the arrest process, about the manner in which his mother's home was allegedly stormed by police officers, and about how he and his family had supposedly been treated disrespectfully. He also soon abandoned his first, rather flimsy, attempt at an alibi, the movie outing in Wisconsin with his girlfriend. That, he now claimed, must have been the day before the murder, on the actual day of Deshaun's murder. He now asserted he had been with his brother, Curtis. Police continued to press him, patiently but persistently. They confronted him directly with the fact that he was unequivocally seen at Wally's, the scene of the earlier robbery. Cody then shifted again, admitting, "I was supposed to be in the motherfucker's face. He stole my phone. All that stupid shit, that don't mean I pulled the trigger." After finally admitting to being in the immediate area at the approximate time of the shooting, and actively, angrily seeking the man who had stolen his phone, Cody Fohrenkam was formally charged with the murder of Deshaun Hill Jr. Investigators felt they had what they needed for a strong case, but Cody, perhaps unknowingly, gave them even more. After the formal interview concluded and he was placed in jail, authorities legally listened into jailhouse calls placed by Cody to his cousin and other individuals close to him. In these clearly recorded calls, he was distinctly heard attempting to solicit and concoct an alibi for the specific time of the shooting. Those individuals he spoke with, however, when later questioned by police, nonetheless denied being with him on that day or at that time. Cody Fohrenkam faced charges of second-degree murder for the death of Deshaun Hill Jr. He pleaded not guilty. As the trial date approached in early November 2022, Dee Hill's grieving family, particularly his distraught mother, Tuesday's shepherd, were further aggravated and pained by procedural delays. The late delivery of crucial pieces of evidence from the state prosecutors to Fohrenkam's defense team, including additional video surveillance footage that had been uncovered, led to a formal and unavoidable delay of jury selection. The defense legitimately needed more time to adequately review these new materials before trial could commence. This frustrating delay meant that the grieving family and friends of Dee Hill would now need to endure the difficult holiday season with the shadow of the upcoming trial looming over them, before they would get the opportunity for the justice they so desperately and understandably sought. "The only thing y'all need to understand is we want justice for my son, Dee Hill," a passionate Tuesday shepherd stated to the media. "We don't want to wait till January. We want it today. That's why we here." It was not only the often slow-moving wheels of the court system that were causing Dee's family additional grief and frustration. It was also their firm and unwavering belief that Cody Fohrenkam, while directly responsible for pulling the trigger, was not the only person who should be held criminally liable, or at least accountable, for Dee's tragic and preventable death. Dee's mother, Tuesday, had made a steadfast habit of driving her children to and from school every single day, a measure she took to ensure that they arrived at school and returned home safely in a neighborhood that sometimes faced challenges. On the day that Dee was senselessly killed, the principal of his school, North Community High, Maury Frislebay, had officially signed off on an organized student walkout of afternoon classes. This walkout was in explicit support of students wishing to join the ongoing protests against the recent police shooting of Amir Locke, protests which were taking place downtown. The Hill family's attorney, William Walker, explained their position that not only was this decision by the principal allegedly against established and clear school board policy regarding student supervision and off-campus activities, but, critically, the parents of the students involved were not notified by the school administration that students would be out of classes and leaving school grounds after lunchtime that day. Her job was to be a principal, to guard these children, and it didn't happen, Mr. Walker asserted forcefully. If it had been such that they had simply called the mother, called the father, and told them, yes, school is going to be out early today for whatever reason, the parents could have come and picked their children up from school. They didn't do any of that. Attorney William Walker subsequently called upon both Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty to open formal criminal investigations into the principal's actions, preferably by convening a grand jury to examine potential negligence or endangerment. In the meantime, the Minneapolis public schools system paid the Hill family a civil settlement of $500,000 while pointedly and legally admitting no direct liability in Dee's death. The family, however, undeterred by the civil settlement, continued to publicly push for criminal charges to be brought against the principal as Cody Fohrenkam's murder trial finally began. In their opening statements at Fohrenkam's trial, his defense team made their position unequivocally clear. They argued vigorously that the state lacked sufficient direct, irrefutable evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Cody Fohrenkam was definitively the killer of Deshaun Hill Jr. His attorneys pointed critically to the fact that the murder weapon had never been located by police. They also emphasized what they characterized as significant inconsistencies in the initial description of the suspect provided by the sole eyewitness to the shooting, Ashley McNamara. Ms. McNamara, they reminded the jury, had originally told police in the immediate aftermath of the traumatic event that her best recollection was that the shooter was a black man who was also clothed entirely in black. The distinctive red trousers worn by the actual shooter and clearly caught on multiple surveillance cameras directly and significantly discredited these initial statements by the eyewitness. Was this discrepancy enough? The defense rhetorically pondered to the jury to establish the necessary reasonable doubt for an acquittal. Thankfully for the state's case, however, Ashley McNamara had formally changed her story and her description of the shooter approximately 2 weeks after her initial statement to police, at which point she aligned her description of the shooter's clothing with the red trousers visible in the surveillance footage that investigators had by then acquired and likely shown her. However, there was also the matter of earlier video footage from the day of the murder, specifically from inside Wally's food store, that did not show Cody Fohrenkam wearing the red trousers at the time he was mugged. In that earlier footage, he wore different colored bottoms, though the black backpack he carried did appear to resemble the same one seen on the shooter in later footage. Fohrenkam's defense attorney, Lisa Skarskovsky, pointed out that there was no direct, irrefutable video evidence showing Cody Fohrenkam ever actually changing his clothes on that day. But the state prosecutors countered this by arguing that there was a strong and logical reason to believe he had, in fact, changed his clothing. They presented surveillance photos taken from outside Wally's food, which showed Cody Fohrenkam being knocked to the ground in what appeared to be wet snow by his mugger. It would have been entirely logical. Prosecutors contended to the jury, after such an incident, for him to have sought to change out of his wet and soiled clothing. Furthermore, and critically for their case, state prosecutors reminded the jury that they had Cody Fohrenkam's own eventual admission during interrogation that he was indeed in the neighborhood at that specific time, actively and angrily searching for the man who had stolen his phone. They had meticulously pieced together the movements of the distinctive man in the red trousers across the entire neighborhood using a mosaic of images from multiple surveillance cameras sourced from various private homes and local shops. The jury returned with their verdict with remarkable and telling quickness. They deliberated for less than 1 hour. Jurors later informed the media that they had all voted in unanimous agreement on Fohrenkam's guilt within mere minutes of leaving the courtroom and beginning their formal deliberations. Cody Fohrenkam was found guilty by the jury of second-degree murder with intent, though not premeditation, and also found guilty of second-degree murder while committing a felony. He now faced a maximum possible sentence of 40 years in prison. The jury foreman, when asked what convinced them so quickly, stated, "I think it was a little bit of everything. The surveillance. The prosecutor did a great job, and no doubt the guy in red pants is Cody Fohrenkam. There wasn't any doubts whatsoever. Everybody agreed it was quick, and as it should have been, justice for Dee Hill." Despite the conviction of Cody Fohrenkam, Deshaun's family continued to publicly maintain their steadfast belief that the school principal also bore a significant degree of responsibility for Deshaun's death due to the decision to allow the student walkout. However, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office ultimately decided not to pursue or investigate potential criminal charges against the Minneapolis North Community High School principal in connection with Deshaun's death. At Fohrenkam's highly emotional sentencing hearing, Judge Julie Allen listened intently to powerful and heartbreaking victim impact statements from Dee's loved ones before delivering her final sentence. The hearing was characterized by raw, unfiltered outbursts of grief and anger from the devastated family, and an atmosphere of profound emotional intensity filled the courtroom. Deshaun's mother, in her statement, pleaded with the judge, "Please give him over 40 years because he don't deserve to be out here killing anybody else's kids," addressing Cody Fohrenkam directly with stern words. Judge Allen stated, "Your victim, Deshaun Hill, was only 15 years old. All he did was walk by you, and as he's walking away from you, in broad daylight, on a public street, you turned and you shot at him, not once, but 3 times. And for what? For what reason? You do deserve the top sentence allowable under the sentencing guidelines." She then sentenced Cody Fohrenkam to an executed sentence of 463 months in prison, which is nearly 38.6 years. The application of the maximum allowable sentence under Minnesota law for his crimes finally delivered to Deshaun's grieving family the legal justice they had so desperately sought and deserved. Though it couldn't, of course, never truly end their profound grief or fill the void left by Dee's absence. In the wake of their devastating loss, and as a testament to Dee's spirit, the Hill family launched a foundation to honor the enduring and inspiring legacy of Deshaun Hill Jr., the nonprofit organization, a beacon of hope born from tragedy, has a vision of serving the North Minneapolis community, providing positive opportunities and mentorship for local youth, and creating healing spaces and support systems for those families and individuals who have been victimized by the pervasive and destructive issue of gun violence. The foundation will also provide much-needed scholarships for talented, hard-working local youths, aiming to foster the kind of bright potential that Dee Hill Jr. himself so clearly and abundantly embodied. Deshaun's family is also actively lobbying for legislative changes, specifically for an increase to the maximum sentence applied to adult murderers who take the lives of children, believing that the current maximum of 40 years is simply not enough for such a heinous and unforgivable crime. Cody Fohrenkam was brought to justice, his future now confined to the walls of a prison. But the senseless, impulsive act of violence that took the life of Deshaun Hill Jr. left an irreplaceable void in his family. His school, his football team, and his entire community. A chance encounter, a fleeting moment of misplaced and unreasoning rage, and a beloved community lost one of its brightest, most promising lights. Dee Hill's positive legacy, however, endures powerfully through his family's foundation, their advocacy, and their unwavering fight for a safer, more just future for all young people. A lasting testament to the remarkable young man he was, and the profound inspiration he continues to be. I'm Donovan, and this has been Dark Truth Unveiled. Thank you for joining us.